Coming up next, I'll be speaking with Matt Peiken, founder of 3 Minute Egg. That's next on the St. Paul Forum. Welcome to the St. Paul Forum. I'm John Forde. Along with Lisa Tabor, I'll be interim host during 2010 while regular host Mike Wassenaar is on sabbatical. With me today is Matt Peiken, founder of 3 Minute Egg. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about 3 Minute Egg. What is it?
It's a blog that focuses on the local art scene. It's a video blog. It's the first in the country that forecasts and promotes daily arts happenings through video. I cover the visual arts, theater, dance, music, poetry, spoken word, literature, and I profile artists 4 days a week at 3minuteegg.org.
Now, full disclosure, I know you some, not a whole lot. We have no business relationship.
We don't.
But I know you're a dynamo filled with energy. Are you editing 3 minutes constantly?
I shoot, edit, produce, post my videos all myself. And I launched this in September of 2008, not really knowing much about the landscape for online video or independent media, for that matter, at least what was possible. I just knew that I couldn't do what I was doing before. And I'd spent 21 years on the staffs of daily newspapers in California and in Minnesota. I moved here in '97 when I got hired by the Pioneer Press as a features writer. And I covered teenagers and college kids, and then I spent 5 years as an arts writer. I did urban life in St. Paul, spent a little time on the editorial board, and then I got sort of sent to the Siberia of newsrooms, which is suburban coverage. And once I was dispatched to North Ramsey County to cover the goings-on in government there, I knew that my time at the Pioneer Press was over. And in fact, I had lunch with a colleague who had left the paper about a year earlier, and I told him if they ever offer another buyout at the Pioneer Press, I am leaping at it. And at that point, it seemed to be happening annually or even a couple of times a year where they would offer buyouts for people to leave the paper. Pioneer Press needed to shave a lot of money off the books, and buyouts was a way to do that. And so anyway, I told my friend I would leave. 3 hours later, the newsroom, they announced another buyout. So I jumped. I didn't even know what I was going to do. And 2 months later, I landed as managing editor of the Walker Art Center's magazine that comes out every other month. And I was there almost a year, and that didn't quite work out. It wasn't a good cultural fit. And I didn't know what I would do next. At that point, I was in my mid-40s and figured I was unemployable. And what am I going to do? So I wrote out a whole list of ideas that I thought I could do, and 3 Minute Egg was just the winning idea. And so I bought a video camera and got my Mac and taught myself how to edit, and went online and looked at what was available for me to use in terms of publishing video. And to date, I've produced more than 300 short documentaries, each between 3 and 4 minutes long, all profiling and focusing on Twin Cities artists.
That's going to keep you very, very busy. So you put out one every other day, something like that?
4 times a week.
4 times a week.
Yeah, it used to be 5 times a week, and I had no time to do the business of the business. And now I'm writing grants, talking to sponsors, trying to develop media partnerships with other established media, talking with donors, trying to raise money that way. So it's not just doing the journalism; it's the business of the business. And now I'm becoming a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 nonprofit. So I have a board of directors. We're trying to raise money. It's still very much in its infancy as far as that goes, but the business, the production side of the business, is still going strong. And I'm working way more hours. I'm out in the public way more than I ever was when I was a features writer at a newspaper. And even then I was out a lot compared to most people. But I'm way more out there now, but I don't mind. It's my own baby.
And having more fun.
I'm having a lot more fun. And it's also, I'm not constrained to the strictures of what mainstream media, what newspapers have to confine themselves to these days, or at least what top editors are confining their staffs to reporting about. You're finding, at the Pioneer Press is just one example, that the newsroom is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking through buyouts, people just leaving because there's no real job security, even though it's a union newspaper. So people are going off and going to law school. I know a number of people who've left the paper and going to law school. People are just leaving the media altogether. And as far as the arts go, they have no people on staff right now who are just full-time arts writers. They have a music writer, and they have a movie reviewer, and who now covers theater because the theater writer left. And they have another reporter who covers pop culture. So she writes about American Idol and other shows. And once in a while, they'll send her to an opening or a new show at the Walker Art Center or the MIA. But by and large, they have nobody covering the Twin Cities art scene. As 3 Minute Egg, right from the get-go, I was producing more video on the local art scene than all other media sources combined in the Twin Cities, right from the get-go. And that's why I thought I could make it with 3 Minute Egg.
How precisely are you defining what arts is? It's really Twin Cities based, correct? Are you going farther afield than that?
Well, Minnesota. I try to keep it to Minnesota creators. In fact, I draw a line. When the Walker brings in shows or has artists from outside the area, the Guthrie brings in plays that are written by playwrights who don't live here, I don't profile those people. It's got to be local choreographers, local composers, local playwrights, local artists, local creators. And so my videos always get into the heart of process. So I talk with the choreographers or the composers or the playwrights or the novelists, as the case may be, about what was going through their head and their heart as they were creating what they do. So I'm not doing show promotion. I'm not a free ad for what's going on. I'm really informing people about what is happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in an artistic process. And I really believe the benefit of 3 Minute Egg, the cumulative effect, is that people who start watching this show, and by the way, it's not just online at 3minuteegg.org, it's also on the Minnesota channel of Twin Cities Public Television.
We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, and so when you watch it and you cumulatively watch these things, you really get an appreciation and an understanding for what goes into the arts lifeblood in this community.
So is it sort of a documentarian, or is there more of a mission dimension to it? I mean, are you doing things like comedy, improv, poetry slams, things like that as well?
I have done poetry slams. I have done improv. I was going to do comedy, and I realized it just doesn't work, in large part because interviewing comedians is horrible. They're the worst interviews. Okay. You know, they either try to be funny or they try to be sardonic, and they just can't give you an interview.
Okay.
So I don't do straight comedians, but virtually everybody else in the local arts scene I do.
Okay. In what sense is the mission? I mean, is it promoting the arts? Is it?
Well, it's more about, it's not so much promoting the arts, it's more informing and educating the public about what it means to be an artist, what it means to produce arts in this town. And I think especially since Minnesotans passed the Legacy Amendment in the 2008 election, which guarantees that 0.3 cents sales tax is now going to, it's split among the arts, water initiatives, and outdoors. And so they estimate that's about $300 million every year additional are in taxes are going into state offices, which are then being distributed out through outdoors, water initiatives, and the arts. And the arts get 19% of that. That's a lot of money. So, you know, as taxpayers, we're paying close to $60 million a year extra that's going to the arts. And I think people need to know that this isn't just frivolous money. They're not just throwing money away. This is going to the lifeblood of what makes the Twin Cities such a spectacular place to live.
And is part of it informing artists of possible modes of livelihood? Do they get a better sense of how they might tap into that?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny you say that, because I've had a lot of artists tell me that they've come to know and appreciate what their colleagues are doing in a way they never did before. I've had visual artists who've told me, I never knew anything that was going on in dance. Or theater people saying, I didn't pay attention to what writers were doing, local writers. And there's a real cross-pollination that happens through watching my show, because one day it'll be a dance piece, the next will be visual art, or what have you. And and one of the things I wanted to do with 3 Minute Egg is I know that people online are not going to tune in every day, or maybe even every week. But when they do tune in, there's something fresh on there. And that's why I produce so many pieces. I think it's important to show people that no matter when you tune in, no matter when you go out in the Twin Cities art scene, there's something fresh happening.
Let's talk a little bit about the changing media landscape itself. Now, 3 Minute Egg is trying to generate enough revenue to sustain and grow and prosper, as I certainly many people believe it should. But the environment has so changed. It was so broadcast driven, it was so advertising driven until really the last 5 years. And as that revenue model falls apart, so many content producers are looking for a way to sustain, and you're kind of starting more at the grassroots and driving it along. What do you see as the future in this?
Well, it's funny you said that 5 years ago the model was advertising driven. I still see it as being advertising driven. It's just that media companies, whether it's grassroots organizations like mine or it's established media like the Star Tribune, are still trying to figure out how to keep advertising strong and keep it paying for itself. Back when it was just print only, for some reason it was very expensive real estate. There were no other options for advertisers, unless they wanted to go broadcast, which was even more expensive. They could do direct mail, but there were very few options. Now with the internet, everybody thinks they can advertise for free, and it makes the real estate much less expensive. So what 3 Minute Egg is founded on a model that has 4 legs to it. One is through advertising or sponsorships, program sponsors, so people can buy sponsorships for 3 Minute Egg and be on the front of my videos. You can also give to 3 Minute Egg as a nonprofit organization. We're new as a nonprofit, but you can donate. It's tax deductible. There's also presenting partnerships with existing media. Right now, one of my videos every week runs on the Star Tribune's website, and 6 months out of the year, at least so far, we're still trying to jockey and figure out what we're going to do going forward. My program runs as a half-hour program on Twin Cities Public Television. And then there's also grants, foundation grants. But those are drying up too, somewhat, because the foundations have lost money in this economy, just like everybody else. So when you talk about what the media landscape is like, one of the pluses of what's happening in the sort of the decay of mainstream media, you're just seeing just a mushrooming of independent media like 3 Minute Egg. Now, I'm just one of several new entities, or relatively new entities, that are out covering the arts. Twin Cities Daily Planet, which covers a lot of ethnic communities, and they're sort of a funnel and venue for other independent media that cover different ethnic communities, like Asian Today, the Spokesman Recorder, and other niche publications go through the Daily Planet. They also have a strong arts editor there. Jay Gabler does a great job. mnartist.org, which is a joint venture of the Jerome Foundation and the Walker, they are involved with arts journalism. Minnesota Playlist, which covers the theater community for the theater community. They're not writing to a mainstream audience so much. It's for theater by theater people. There's visual arts sites like MLPSart.com or Quadlibetica, which is an arts criticism site. So there's a lot of things that are filling the gap for arts coverage. And then in terms of mainstream coverage, Daily Planet, there's the Minnesota Independent, which is an online-only publication, has received some foundation funding. And then most people seem to know about MinPost, which is produced by a former publisher of the Star Tribune and has editors on staff who used to be on staff at the Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press. And they're basically, they're using a lot of writers locally to create sort of half-blog, half-reported pieces that cover politics, the arts, sports, across the board. So there's a real mushrooming that's happening because of the environment, yet we're all struggling to still figure out how to really monetize this. MinPost has been fortunate enough to land some big foundation support. 3 Minute Egg has gotten smaller foundation support. Metropolitan Regional Arts Council gave me a generous grant. Ramon, the Jewish Community Arts Council, gave me some money to keep doing what I do. But it's hard, and the landscape is not figured out by anybody. And the reason we all exist still is because people still need and want information. We're just trying to figure out how to support it financially.
You want to talk a little bit about Citizens United, the Supreme Court ruling that happened recently. Basically, it overturned about 100 years of established law and gave corporations essentially the same rights as human beings. How does that trickle down to us?
Well, it's funny. A lot of people may not make that connection. They may not even know what Citizens United was. And essentially, the Supreme Court has basically overturned 100 years of rulings related to the media, saying that corporations have the same rights as individuals to assert its right to free speech. So corporations can spend untold amounts on advertising, political advertising, to support whichever candidate they want to. how that trickles down here is that corporations such as Comcast, Time Warner, big media organizations like CBS, NBC, Turner Television, all the big media corporations have way more money than small meat and potatoes organizations like mine. So what that does is it sets up a hierarchy with some of the big telecom companies that they get priority or can pay for priority in terms of bandwidth, pipeline. So you, the consumer, you might have your DSL connection, and you might be able to get some of these big companies will come in very easily on your home system, where somebody like me who can't afford to pay the big bucks for bandwidth that these other companies do, we might come across very slowly, or video may not transmit well because it's through bandwidth the size of the eye of a needle. So the connection is Citizens United gave these corporations the right of an individual to free speech. Corporations have been angling for decades to leverage their buying power for free speech. The telecom companies now have the right to set up a tiered system, or they're trying to make it so the FCC doesn't take away their right to have a tiered system that favors organizations who are willing to pay big money to have unfettered pipeline access and bandwidth.
So we're kind of nibbling at the edge of what's called net neutrality, and we'll get right back to it. But first I want to say, in case you're just joining us, we're talking with Matt Peiken, the founder of 3 Minute Egg, a local video blog. So net neutrality, what does that really mean?
I think you might be in a better position to actually say what net neutrality is. Net neutrality essentially would create, or it would legislate a level playing field for service providers, for internet providers, media companies, for end users, consumers who want access to the information that people like I and others are putting out, that there'd be no hierarchy, that people have a right to a certain level of internet access and bandwidth and broadband, and wouldn't get charged exorbitantly for it for living in rural areas. There's a lot of factors that go into net neutrality, but basically asserts that internet access is a right. And just like we can't be discriminated against through our home phone companies. Everybody has the same right to certain home phone lines. And well, the same thing would be with internet access.
And that they can't charge greater rates for basically suppressing other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and where that comes into play is as technology becomes technology makes it easier for providers, for content providers, to get information out there. It still has to be consumed by people. You don't want blockage there because people can't afford to pay for certain levels of access. So there are blocks being thrown up to providers like me, or not yet, but there's the threat that it will cost a lot to put up the kind of program I'd put up, because video takes a lot of bandwidth. So it'll cost a lot for me to be able to continue to do my program. It would cost a lot for the end user to be able to receive that program unfettered.
I know that you want to talk a little bit about the iPad and how technology is changing and making publishing more available to, actually easier, not just more available, but simpler for a lot of people. And it seems you were of mixed opinions that to some extent the iPad is not all it's cracked up to be.
It's not that the iPad itself, or any tablet, it's not that that's a problem, but people are talking about how that's going to be the salvation of print media. David Carr of the New York Times has raved about it and saying that this is the New York Times survival, and other newspapers are going to survive because of this device. Well, until this device is in the hands of 90% of Americans, 80% of Americans, it's not going to make that big of a difference. People can't afford it right now. Right now an iPad costs $500, and while sales have been brisk early on, until it's ubiquitous, until the cell phone. Right now, even a cell phone isn't ubiquitous. I have an iPhone, and 3 Minute Egg looks great on an iPhone. But how many people have it? Some. But until everybody has a device like this, where they can just take it wherever they go, and they can access information and do access information in this way, I don't know if it's going to happen in time enough to save print publishers who are struggling month to month to month with such high overhead to maintain. And a paper like the Pioneer Press, which I didn't think would be at the brink this soon, I really worry that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, that the technology won't be in the hands of enough consumers to keep a paper like the Pioneer Press printing. It might exist digitally and on the internet, but with a much truncated staff and mission.
Let me ask you this. Is Craig Newmark the single guy who did the most to damage newspapers, the founder of Craigslist?
Well, classified ads have been the bread and butter, or at least the bread.
Yeah.
It's not the butter,
Okay.
because the insert ads that automobile dealers and grocery stores bought that came in your paper every Sunday were that was the bread. The classifieds were the butter, and at one point classifieds amounted to as much as 40% of advertising revenue for most newspapers. So yeah, that's gone away, and classified advertising is not coming back. But look, that just put the microscope on what's happening in newspapers much sooner. Even with what Craigslist has done in decimating classifieds, there have been so many other things that have happened in media and social media that the newspapers have not been up on, and even today aren't using well. You have some reporters at newspapers who are twittering, tweeting, using Facebook well, other social media now like Foursquare, which you can tell people where you're at in any given stretch of time. And I'm trying to use that with 3 Minute Egg, telling people I'm shooting from this location. Now, how many people are actually accessing that information? Probably not very many. But the point is, you have to be on top of it and out there, so when consumers are ready to access that information, are ready to come on board, you're there. And newspapers always seem like they're the last adopters. And when I was at the Pioneer Press, and I'm still there, in 2006, I proposed a video series called Suburban Safari. Now, this is when I was, like I said, dispatched to the Siberia of newspapers. So I thought, I'm going to make something of this. I'm going to do a video series. I called it Suburban Safari, where you just, I'm a Twin Cities, bon vivant, posing, as this, and I'm going to drop into the netherworld of Twin Cities suburbia and show you as a viewer what goes on here, where's life here. And I did a couple of episodes. Editors wouldn't even talk with me about it. I produced 2 video pieces. Now, this is at the dawn of when newspapers were starting to do video. I introduced this idea. I'm not saying I was groundbreaking in a national sense, but nobody was doing this at the newspaper yet, and editors wouldn't even talk with me about it. I think there's this entrenched mindset and a culture there that we're still going to do the business that we do, but we're going to find a different way to do it. And I think, no, you have to change the product that you put out there. I think you have to fundamentally change certain things, and newspapers are very averse to change. And it's individual people who can push about the edges and make some things happen, but it's not happening institutionally.
And so much of that is literally the wavelength of how long people can consume information. I mean, typically it took 6 to 8 minutes to read a full-length newspaper article, and now 3 Minute Egg is 3 minutes. How does Twitter play into this at 140 characters? What is that? It's like 12 seconds of reading?
Well, it's not just about reading. It's people view video. They come to video differently than they do text. And this is only something I have learned since doing 3 Minute Egg. The idea of sitting in front of your computer and browsing and surfing the web, people will do it for 45 minutes, an hour and a half, without even really thinking about it. They browse, they go from site to site to site, and they probably don't finish any article. They'll read a little bit here, a little bit there. Well, video demands your attention. So video itself it's a tough sell for the internet. And it's a tough sell for my audiences. I mean, I have viewers, but not nearly as many as I think I should have. And I think one of the challenges is that people don't want to sit in front of their computers and just watch video unfettered. They do. I have some audience, but again, it's not what it should be. And I can tell by the percentage of people who watch the videos, they check out at certain points. I can see at the halfway point how many people are still there with me, how many people are at the 3/4 point, and how many people finish a video. And again, until the iPad and until the iPhone are in everybody's hands, where it's not sitting in front of a computer. You're on your couch, or you're on a bus, or maybe in the passenger seat of a car, hopefully not the driver's seat, that you can watch these things, and it's not a psychological barrier. And That's what newspapers are confronting too, is that people aren't even finishing most of the articles, even if they click over. So the newspapers might get click counts, but they're not getting people who are really reading online.
How much pressure is this putting on, kids coming out of high school today? Does everybody have to publish? For a while I was thinking that every kid applying to a decent liberal arts college is going to have a video stream resume from their webpage.
Well, one thing that technology cannot dictate is an entrepreneurial spirit. You either have it or you don't. And there are classes now that teach about entrepreneurial journalism. I know so many people, and it doesn't matter what age range you're in, you don't want to do, if you don't have it in you to start a business, to think that way, to fight for everything you have to fight for by being a business owner, you're not going to do it. So many journalists, in my generation, I can speak to this firsthand. You go to a J school, journalism school, you get a job at a newspaper, you don't want to worry about your paycheck. You just want to go out and do your story and be confident that every 2 weeks that paycheck's going to be in the mail. So kids coming up through J school right now, it's not that their expectations are any different. Sure, they know Facebook, they know Twitter. They're much more educated in terms of the realm of media that exists today. It doesn't make them any more predisposed to dive in and be entrepreneurial. They still want to get the jobs at newspapers that I got 20 years ago. Those jobs may not exist and don't exist, but there are different jobs. There are certainly entry-level jobs, and there are far more different kinds of jobs now that exist for people who want to work in the media than existed 20 years ago.
We have about a little over a minute left, and I know you wanted me to apologize to Garrison Keillor that we had to bump him for you.
You can't get Garrison on? Oh, I'm sorry.
We went just a little bit long.
Oh, okay. Well, next show you can get.
Anything you want to cover in the last minute?
No, it's just that I would just tell people watching the show that the landscape is changing all the time. And the shows that exist today, many of them, and the newspapers and the publications that exist today, most of them will not exist 5 years from now. But other ones will be out there. And if you have information you want to get out there, if you want to be a producer, the landscape has never been better to start something. It's easy to get something up into the sky. The rocket fuel to get something up there is easy. Keeping it in orbit is the challenge.
Okay, very nice. Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
We've been talking with Matt Peiken, creator of 3 Minute Egg. We'll see you next time on the St. Paul Forum.